I'm Kristen Ward, and welcome to Maquette Vallant's Summer of Stories. If you're a fan of the show, you can help keep the stories coming by becoming a patron at patreon.com/MV Storydance. Support from patrons like you helps me upgrade my equipment, offer stipends to special guests, even pay myself for some of the 30+ hours that go into each episode. In return, you'll get access to special behind-the-scenes footage, photos, special downloads, and more. Tonight's story is The Cat Who Walked by Herself. It's based on Rudyard Kipling's The Cat Who Walked by Himself from the collection of Just So stories first published in 1902. It's important to acknowledge that Kipling spent much of his life in India, and many of his stories are heavily inspired by Indian folklore. It's also important to acknowledge that Kipling was an imperialist, with colonialist and even racist views depicted in some of his writing, which makes his work problematic today. As our folklore changes and evolves with our culture and values, we can all benefit each other by acknowledging harms of the past, encouraging new voices to depict more respectful narratives in their storytelling, and allowing space for people of all walks and identities to tell the stories of their own cultures. A long, long time ago, before even your ancestors can remember, all the animals were wild. The dog was wild, the horse was wild, the cow was wild, as wild could be. But the wildest of all the wild animals was the cat. She walked by herself, and all places were alike to her. Of course, the man was wild too. He was dreadfully wild. He didn't even begin to be tame until he met the woman who had some standards. Well, she found a nice dry cave instead of a heap of wet leaves to lie down in. And she lit a nice fire at the back of the cave and hung a dried horse-skin tail down at the mouth of the cave. That night, they ate wild sheep roasted on the hot stones and flavored with wild garlic and wild pepper and wild cherries for dessert. Then the man went to sleep in front of the fire, but the woman stayed up. She threw another log on the fire, and she made a magic. She made the first singing magic in the world. Out in the wet wild woods, all the wild animals gathered together where they could see the light of the fire a long way off, and they wondered what it meant. Wild Dog lifted up his wild nose and smelled the smell of the roast mutton and said, "I will go and see, for I think it is good. Cat, come with me." "Nay," said the cat, "I am the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to me. I will not come." But when Wild Dog had gone a little way, Cat said to herself, "All places are alike to me. Why should I not go too and come away at my own liking?" And so she slipped softly after Wild Dog and hid herself where she could hear everything. When Wild Dog reached the mouth of the cave, he lifted up the dried horse skin with his nose and sniffed the beautiful smell of the roast mutton. And the woman heard him and laughed and said, "Here comes the first wild thing out of the wild woods. What do you want?" Wild Dog said, "Oh, my enemy, what is this that smells so good in the wild woods?" Then the woman picked up a roast mutton bone and threw it to the dog. Wild Dog gnawed the bone, and it was more delicious than anything he had ever tasted. And he said, "Oh, my enemy, give me another." The woman said, "Wild thing out of the wild woods, help my man to hunt through the day and guard this cave at night, and I will give you as many roast bones as you desire." Wild Dog crawled into the cave and laid his head on the woman's lap and said, "Oh, my friend, I will help your man to hunt through the day, and at night I will guard your cave." "Ah," said the cat, listening. "This is a very wise woman and a very foolish dog." She went back through the wet wild woods, waving her wild tail and walking by her wild lone. She never told anyone. Out in the wild woods, all the wild animals wondered what had happened to Wild Dog. And at last, Wild Horse stamped with his foot and said, "I will go and see why Wild Dog has not returned. Cat, come with me." "Nay," said the cat, "I am the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to me. I will not come." But all the same, she followed Wild Horse very softly and hid herself where she could hear everything. When the woman heard Wild Horse tripping and stumbling on his long mane, she laughed and said, "Here comes the second wild thing out of the wild woods. What do you want?" Wild Horse said, "Oh, my enemy, where's Wild Dog?" The woman laughed and offered Wild Horse fresh meadow grass that she had found and cut that morning, and said, "Wild thing out of the wild woods, you have not come here for Wild Dog, but for the sake of this good grass." Wild Horse, smelling it, said, "Yes, that is true. Give it to me to eat." The woman said, "Wild thing out of the wild woods, bend your wild head and wear what I give you, and you shall eat the wonderful grass 3 times a day." Wild Horse bent his head, and the woman slipped a plaited halter over it, and braided his mane so that he would no longer stumble. And Wild Horse breathed on the woman's feet and said, "Oh, my provider, I will be your servant for the sake of this wonderful grass." "Ah," said the cat, listening, "this is a very clever woman and a very foolish horse." And off she went through the wet wild woods, waving her wild tail and walking by her wild lone. Next day, Wild Cow went to the cave, and Cat followed, just the same as before. And when Wild Cow had agreed to share her milk in exchange for the wonderful grass, Cat again went back through the wet wild woods, waving her wild tail and walking by her wild lone, just the same as before. The next day, the cat waited to see if any other wild thing would go up to the cave, but no one moved in the wet wild woods. So the cat walked there by herself, and she saw the woman milking the cow, and she saw the light of the fire in the cave, and she smelled the smell of the warm white milk. And Cat said, "Oh, my enemy, what is that wonderful smell?" The woman laughed and said, "Wild thing out of the wild woods, go back to the woods again, for we have no more need in our cave of either friends nor servants." Cat said, "I am not a friend, and I am not a servant. I am the cat who walks by herself, and I wish to come into your cave." Woman said, "You are the cat who walks by herself. You have said so yourself. You are neither a friend nor a servant. Go away then, and walk by yourself in all places alike." Cat pretended to be sorry. "Must I never come into the cave? Must I never sit by the warm fire? Must I never drink the warm white milk? You are very wise and very beautiful. You should not be cruel even to a cat." Woman said, "I knew I was wise, but no one ever told me I was beautiful. So I will make a bargain with you. If ever I say one word in your praise, you may come into the cave. And if you say 2 words in my praise, I never shall. But if I say 2 words in your praise, then you may come into the cave and sit beside the fire. And if you say 3 words in my praise, I never shall. But if If I say 3 words in your praise, then you may come into the cave, sit by the fire, and drink the warm white milk 3 times a day for always and always." Then Cat arched her back and said, "Now let the curtain at the mouth of the cave, and the fire at the back of the cave, and the milk pots that stand beside the fire remember what my enemy has said." Cat went away and hid herself in the wet wild woods by her wild moon for a long time, till the woman forgot all about her. One morning Cat heard a terrible wailing sound from the direction of the cave, and crept quietly to see what it could be. There was a baby in the cave. It was crying, and the woman could get no peace. And so she carried him outside the cave and gave him a handful of pebbles to play with, but still the baby cried. Cat crept closer, put out her patty paw, and patted the baby softly on the cheek. It cooed, and the cat rubbed against its fat knees and tickled it under its little chin with her tail. The baby laughed, and the woman heard him and smiled. "Ah, a blessing on you. You have done me a great service." That very second, the dried horse-skin curtain at the mouth of the cave came down, because it remembered the bargain she had made with the cat. And when the woman went to pick it up, the cat was sitting quite comfy inside the cave. "It is I," said the cat. "You have spoken a word in my praise, and now I can sit within the cave. But still, I am the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to me." The woman was very angry, and she shut her lips tight and went back to her work. But the baby cried again, because the cat had gone away. The woman could not hush it. "Now," said the cat, "I will sing the baby a song that shall keep him asleep for an hour." And she snuggled up close to the baby and began to purr loud and low, low and loud, until the baby fell fast asleep. The woman smiled as she looked down upon the two of them and said, "That is wonderfully done. No question but you are very clever, Cat." That very minute and second, the smoke at the fire at the back of the cave came down in clouds from the roof, because it remembered the bargain she had made with the cat. And when the smoke cleared away, the cat was sitting quite comfy and cozy close to the fire. "Oh, my enemy," said the cat, "you have now spoken a second word in my praise, and now I may sit by the warm fire for always. But still, I am the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to me." Then the woman was even more angry than before, and she let down her hair and put more wood on the fire, and began to make a magic that should prevent her from saying a third word in praise of the cat. This was not a singing magic. This was a still magic. And by, the cave grew so still that a little mouse crept out of a corner and ran across the floor. "Oh, my enemy," said the cat, "is that little mouse part of your magic?" "Oh, no, indeed." "Then the mouse will do me no harm if I eat it." "No," said the woman, "eat it quickly, and I will ever be grateful to you." Cat made one jump and caught the little mouse. And the woman said, "100 thanks. Even the first friend is not quick enough to catch little mice as you have done." That very moment and second, the milk pot that stood beside the fire cracked into 2 pieces, because it remembered the bargain she had made with the cat. "Oh, my enemy," said the cat, in between mouthfuls of the warm white milk that lay in one of the broken pieces, "you have now spoken 3 words in my praise, and now I can sit inside the cave, warm myself by the fire, and drink the warm white milk for always and always. But still, I am the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to me." Even so, though thousands of years have passed, Cat has kept her part of the bargain. Well, she will hunt mice, and she is kind to babies while she is in the house, as long as they don't pull her tail too hard. And when she has done that, and in between times, and when the moon gets up and night comes, she is the cat who walks by herself, and all places are alike to her. And she goes out into the wet wild woods, down the wild streets, or up on the wet wild rooftops, waving her wild tail and walking by her wild love. The Just So stories are a collection of origin stories, and this tale offers an explanation of how wild animals became tame. It's also a story about how the first cat tamed, through a little trickery, her human rival. Do you have pets at home? How have they tamed or trained you? Tell us about them in the comments below, or post on Facebook or Instagram with hashtag #MVSummerOfStories. Telling this story also got me thinking about the cats who walk by themselves in the wilds of my own neighborhood. And so I called on Rivke Bloomberger, whose group Hill District Cats helps to feed and manage a 10-plus feral cat colony in the Hill District of Pittsburgh.
Tell me a little bit about Hill District Cats and how you started with them.
The number one thing that I do is I feed feral cats. So I feed in the Hill District. It's about like 15-20 minutes away from my home. And I feed a feral cat colony, a fixed feral cat colony. So the number one thing that I do is I feed my cats, but I'm very into spay and neutering. So I basically have different colonies that I help around Pittsburgh that I spay and neuter the cats. And very occasionally I'll like take on these like special cases. Cats that are old, dumped in colonies, cats that are injured.
So what are some things that humans should know about approaching stray or feral cats in the wilds of Pittsburgh?
So one thing to do is not to directly approach them and try to pet them, because often feral cats think that humans are a threat to them, a predator, and if they're very freaked out, their defenses go up and they might bite or scratch. Stray cats, even if they're friendly, if they were outside, they're also on defense, and you want to try to minimize physical contact.
So our cat in the story is able to trick her human into letting her sit inside the cave and warm herself by the fire and drink milk. What are ways humans today can help cats find shelter, warmth, and food?
Definitely by putting out food. That's like a really good, cats have the most amazing sense of picking up food. So anyone can feed feral cats. Shelter's a little more complicated. I think the easiest way is just to put out like a styrofoam box and fill it with straw. I think that's the best, easiest, cheapest way that someone can give shelter to ferals.
So is there a resource that folks can call if they see a cat who might be in distress in their neighborhood?
Probably animal control would be the best bet. Animal control usually comes right away. Homeless Cat Management Team is a really large organization that helps homeless cats out.
And do you have any cats yourself?
3.
How have they tamed you?
They've taught me so much patience and about commitment. They are amazing.
Thank you so much for making time with me. I know that you were super busy this week. Tell us how to find out more about Hill District Cats.
So you can go on the Facebook page. It's called Hill District Cats, and it's a little about the cats that we feed and how to take care of cat colonies and the cats that we take on and the care that they need.
Great. I'll post the link in the description to the video too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you enjoy the show, please like, share, or subscribe below. You can also help keep the stories coming by joining us at patreon.com/MV Story Dance. I'll see you next week for episode 3. In the meantime, you can catch any missed episodes right here.